702. The Naked Scientist.
23 minutes to 3 o'clock, time for the Naked Scientist. All of your science-related questions to come through on 011 883 0702 and the WhatsApp line 072 702 1702. Happy Monday, Dr. Chris Smith. How are you doing?
Happy Monday to you as well, Lebo. I'm very good. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I have to ask a question. Have there ever been studies that have been done around the loyalty to teams that lose in sport?
Oh, I'm sure there have. Anyone who's a follower of the England rugby team, usually, except not this weekend, just gone, knows all about that, and many football teams as well. I don't know if you caught any of the game between England and France on Saturday, but if you didn't, I mean, wow.
I did not.
What an amazing game. I honestly, I kind of, when I watch England play, any game, actually, I usually watch us and get to the point where I either think, right, we're going to win this, or we're definitely going to lose this. And usually it happens right at the end where we lose. And I watched us almost win, and then immediately see victory snatched from that, and then thought, well, that's it now. And I was just about to turn the television off in disgust and walk away. And a try was scored, and I thought, I can't believe this. And then it happened again. And I thought, this is just the most amazing bit of rugby, probably the most amazing game I've ever seen right at the end there. So, yeah, I think I have a little bit of personal data in watching teams and staying loyal to teams that lose a lot, especially in the World Cup. But no, I think there probably is an evidence base, but I'm not familiar with it. But it's one of those things, we're loyal to those we love, aren't we? And we have enormous bonding to our kin and to our background and our origins, so we tend to support them relentlessly. You see the same thing with people who leave their homeland. There's a lot of South Africans who live in England, but they will sure as hell come out fighting for South Africa when the sport's on.
Definitely will. Thank you so much for that one. We jump into everybody's questions on 072 702 702 or 011 883 0702. So one question from Victor in Johannesburg says, do atoms have a mind that carries to the next life that they must form?
They always say you must never listen to a word an atom says, because they make up everything. But the evidence is no, atoms are not alive. Atoms are the particles that make up everything. They literally do. That was an insight from, I think, Democritus back thousands of years ago, thought that there must be tiny particles that make up everything. And the Greeks had the concept of there being eventually a point where you can't divide things up anymore. That's where we get the word atom, because the word atom is from the Greek atomos, meaning can't be cut. They had this concept that you would get down to a point where you couldn't make things any smaller. You could not cut things down anymore because you reach a fundamental building block. So they were pretty insightful back even then. But those atoms are particles. They have a particular reproducible structure with a tiny nucleus full of protons and neutrons in some cases. That was the insight and the discovery of Rutherford over 100 years ago. By firing alpha particles at bits of gold foil, he realised that there had to be a tiny positively charged nucleus and a cloud of negatively charged electrons. Those atoms themselves, though, don't have memories. They don't know where they've been. They can't change what they are unless they are radioactive, in which case they can break down into a different type of atom, a different element entirely, but they don't have memories. They can't carry with them information, but they can be entangled with other particles. So if we take a photon, which is a packet of light, not an atom, but it's a packet of light, we can create two photons, we can entangle them at source and then move one to one side of the universe and one to the other, and one almost knows, in inverted commas, what the other one's doing, because if you change one, its entangled partner also changes. Einstein initially didn't believe this and dubbed it spooky action at a distance, but then did acknowledge that this is the case. It's very bizarre, we don't understand it, but there must be some kind of dimension that these things are talking to each other that we're not aware of, but they don't have memory in that respect, no.
All right, I've got a very intense question here from Dr. Mzobe in Krugersdorp, who says, Naked Scientist, what are the movement abnormalities when the dopaminergic mesocortical to motor cortex are disrupted by a lesion? And what about the disruption of the connections from VTA to the cerebellum?
Right, okay. Yeah, this is quite detailed neuroanatomy. What's being referred to is the dopaminergic circuits in the brain originate largely from part of the brain stem, the upper part of the brain stem, midbrain. There's a region of tissue there which is called the substantia nigra. And a little bit higher, there's another region, the ventral tegmental area, the VTA. There's an area there where there are cells which use dopamine as the chemical that they use for their signalling. They project to a range of different places in the nervous system, but they have very rich inputs to a structure called the striatum. The striatum is part of your basal ganglia, which are a bunch of nuclei, big collections of nerve cells deep within the brain, which are uniquely tied up with how we think and have impulses and generate thoughts, but also how we move. And if the dopamine input to those regions is robbed away, and this can occur for a range of reasons, but most commonly in conditions like Parkinson's disease, then the dopamine signal is weakened in that area, and it has the effect of inhibiting your ability to move. On the other hand, if you augment the activity of the dopamine circuits via drugs or some other reason, then it can cause the opposite, because dopamine always facilitates movement in the nervous system. So if someone gets too much dopamine signaling, they then can become hyperkinetic, and this means they move too much. And there's another condition called Huntington's disease, which is caused by actually a breakdown of cells in the striatum. You lose a certain population of nerve cells there. If you lose those cells, it then releases the normal inputs that turn off the dopamine circuit, so you get a bit too much dopamine signaling back into other bits of your basal ganglia, and that can make people move a bit too much. And this is why people with Huntington's disease, especially early in the condition, will often show sporadic, spontaneous movements that they can't control and can find quite distressing. So this is the action of dopamine, always to facilitate movement. So if you lose dopamine, you move less. If you augment dopamine with drugs or other conditions, you can move more and sometimes too much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mzobe, for that question. Let's go to the lines. Godfrey in Santon. Hi, Godfrey. Go ahead.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
Well, I would like to ask the doctor, what causes hiccups when I shave my facial hair?
Ooh,
What? Hiccups
that's
when you
unusual.
shave your facial hair?
Yes,
Godfrey.
when I shave or when I remove a beard, every time when my skin gets in contact with the face, with the shaving machine, I get hiccups.
Is it not the way you breathe or swallow when that happens?
No. I've been monitoring that, and it happens because I shave every second day, and that happens.
Yo,
Wow.
doctor?
Well, I mean, I've never been asked that one before, and I think you are probably a little bit unusual, but I think probably what's going on here, my speculation, I don't know the answer, but my speculation would be, first of all, what's hiccups? The fancy medical term for hiccups is singultus, and hiccups are unwanted, aberrant barrages of nerve impulses that go down your phrenic nerve, which is the nerve that controls your diaphragm, which is the big dome-shaped muscle that separates your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity, and it helps you breathe. So when your diaphragm contracts, it pulls air into your chest because it lowers the pressure inside your chest, and this means air pressure outside your body is higher than the pressure inside, so air rushes in. And when you have a batch of hiccups, you have this activity in your diaphragm, air starts to rush in, but then your vocal cords close, and the air hits the vocal folds as it's on its way in, making a noise. Now, that activity from the phrenic nerve originates in the brainstem in various nuclei, clusters of nerve cell bodies, which are concerned with generating your pattern of breathing. And some of this is under completely automatic control, obviously, because when you go to sleep, you don't have to think about breathing, otherwise you'd asphyxiate. So some of this is automatic. There's a pattern generator there, and you can surmount that and put voluntary control on top of it as well. Those nerve nuclei are sitting quite close to where the inputs from your face nerve sensation in your trigeminal nerve come in. So it's possible that in some people, when you stimulate one batch of nerve fibres, there's a spillover of activity into adjacent bits of the nervous system that might, in some people, be sufficient to trigger patterns of rhythmic activity in these areas that would normally control your respiratory pathways, and that is triggering the hiccup cycle to occur. And you do get this sort of cross-wiring in the nervous system quite often. It's very common. And some people, for instance, have a photic sneeze reflex, where when they look at bright lights, they then feel a very hard to resist urge to sneeze violently. And in fact, some people use this as a way to help them. If you've got that sneeze, you just can't make it happen. You look at a nice bright light and then, oh, there's the sneeze you really wanted, and it feels just fantastic. I've got that. About 20% of the population have the photic sneeze reflex, and that's probably a similar phenomenon. Some people also have cross-wiring on their body, so if they scratch one bit of their skin, they'll actually feel the scratching in two places, where they're scratching and also elsewhere on the body. I've got that too. If I pinch my elbow, I also feel the sensation on the side of my chest, roughly in line with where my elbow is. That's probably a developmental thing, where the nerves that grew my arm were dragged out of that bit of my body surface, taking some cross-innervation with them. So I suspect that is why Godfrey's hiccups happen when he shaves. But I've never been asked that before, and I've never come across anyone else. I think you're very special, Godfrey. You are anyway, but I think your experience is very special.
Very unique, Godfrey. You need to start journaling and keeping us updated.
I'll do that, Ravia. Thank you very much.
We're still with the Naked Scientist. We've got a voice note.
Good afternoon, doctor. I just want to find out, why do we have kidney failures when we have two kidneys? Can the other one not take up when the other one fails?
Good question, Doctor.
Well, yeah, you're quite right. We've got two kidneys, one on each side. If you put your hands on your hips to sort of stand there looking like you've just run a marathon, or you're a bit frustrated at a management meeting, where your fingers are pointing and resting on your back, that's roughly where the kidneys are on each side. So they're about fist-sized in a healthy adult on each side, and they are intended to last you a lifetime, because each of them's got about 1 million of these functional units, got a nephron in it, which is an arrangement of blood vessels and special tubes that can filter blood, throw away the nasties and turn that into urine, and reabsorb the stuff that we do want to save water and sugar and other important chemicals that are in the bloodstream. Although there's two of them, you've got to think of them as working as one, because although they're in two places, it's a bit like having one giant kidney that you just separated and put on both sides of the body to make best use of the space and to make the plumbing easy, which is what they've basically done. So although you've got two of them, regard them as one, and if a disease affects one of them, it's going to affect the other one at the same time, usually. There are a few exceptions to that, things like abnormal anatomy or infections or so on that can scar a kidney. But if there's a degenerative process that's affecting the kidney function, it will affect both. And when you become symptomatic, in other words, the kidney failure has got to a point where it's beginning to cause symptoms, at that point, both kidneys have been impacted down to below a level where they just can't keep up with what your body needs anymore, which is when we describe the process of kidney failure as having kicked in. And there are a range of reasons why that happens. Things like diabetes is a very common one. High blood pressure is a very common reason why the kidneys can clap out. So eating a healthy diet, not smoking, that's another big one, and making sure that you keep your weight under control so you don't become diabetic. Those are really good ways to make sure you maximise the duration of the kidney function you have.
Thank you so much for that question on the WhatsApp line via voice note. Here's a question that says, and I hope I am understanding correctly. It's from Grand Obadia Sitsedi in Rustenburg, who says, afternoon, Relebogile and the doctor. I would like to find out from the doctor, can a bullet projectile fatally wound a person when free falling after it was fired from a firearm 90 degrees into the air? Can it puncture zinc roof sheets as well? Is a question.
Right, well, the rationale for asking this question is often you see where there's been a war or something, footage on television of these people running round with guns, firing them up in the air in celebration of a ceasefire, paradoxically, or the end of a conflict. This is a very dangerous thing to do, because if you think about it, the bullet is propelled from the gun with all of the energy in the explosive, the charge that's in the gun, and it's fired up in the air, so it's doing work against gravity. As it goes up in the air, gravity is accelerating the bullet back the other way, so it slows down. But it will gain height, which is proportional to how much energy was put into the bullet when it was fired by the gun. It will reach a maximum height, and then it will begin to come down. And it will accelerate under gravity as though you dropped a stone from that height, or something of equivalent mass, down towards the ground. So the question, therefore, is, will it be travelling at the same speed when it comes back down to the ground and therefore could hit someone in the head by the time it gets back to the ground as it was when it left the gun? The answer is no, it won't, but it's still going to be going very fast and could do someone a nasty injury, which is why you absolutely should not fire guns up in the air, because the leads will come back down and they will come down fast and they will hurt. So do not do that. But the reason the bullet is slower making that return journey is that going through the air, it's slowing down because of air resistance. And once it gets to its final height and then begins to fall, unlike a bullet fired from a rifled gun, which is going to go in a straight twisting pattern up in the air, as it comes down, it's likely to tumble as well because it's not being launched from a gun with a spiralling trajectory anymore. So as it tumbles, it will make more turbulence, it will attract more air resistance, so it will lose more energy to the air, so its terminal velocity is going to be lower. So the answer is it will be going slower than when it left the gun, but it can still do nasty injuries to people. Please don't fire guns straight up in the air because it will come down on someone's head or it will come down through their greenhouse. Either way, they're going to be pretty unhappy about it.
Thank you so much for that question. This is a 1-minute one, Dr. Chris Smith, saying, I'm 62. How important or necessary is it to be dewormed?
Well, it depends if you're exposed to worms, of course. Worms are parasites. We pick them up from the environment. There's a range of different types of them. Sometimes we pick them up from the food we eat. Sometimes we pick them up because of where we've been walking with bare feet, because there are some worms that exist as larvae in the soil that can get through our skin and then get into our intestines, having gone via usually the lungs, actually, and then they get coughed up and swallowed. So if you're at risk because you live in an area where there are worms in the environment, or you've been eating food where you know that food could be contaminated with worm eggs or the component segments of worms, or you've been caring for people who may be infected, having close personal contact with people who may be infected, that means you may be infected as well. If you have symptoms of parasite burden as well, bloating, abdominal pain, sometimes anemia can be a symptom of this, weight loss can be a sign of this, you should get checked out. It's very easy to get dewormed. We do it for our dogs and cats all the time. It's the same in a human. Very, very easy. Simple drugs, low side effects, and could actually make a huge difference to your health. So you have to make a risk assessment based on your own exposure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chris Smith. Back together next week.
See you next time.